The Korean Mafia boss's baby kept crying on the train until a black single mother did the unthinkable. The infant's screams pierced through the first-class cabin like shattered glass. Relentless and desperate, every passenger within earshot winced, shifted uncomfortably, or shot irritated glances toward the source of the disturbance. But none dared to complain. Not when they saw the man holding the child. Briar Lee sat rigidly in his seat, his jaw clenched so tight it could shatter steel. The custom-tailored charcoal suit that normally made him look like carved obsidian now seemed to constrict around him like a cage. Traditional Korean tattoos, dragons and phoenixes crawled up his neck from beneath his crisp white collar, marks of power that meant nothing in this moment. His normally cold, calculating eyes held a flicker of something foreign. Panic. Raw, unfiltered panic. The baby, his son, continued to wail, tiny fists flailing against Briar's chest. 3 months old and already bearing the weight of a legacy he didn't ask for. 3 months since Minji had taken her last breath, bringing this child into the world. 3 months since Briar Lee, the most feared man in the Korean-American underground, had become something he never thought possible. Helpless. "Sir." One of his bodyguards leaned in carefully, speaking low enough that other passengers couldn't hear. "We could stop at the next station. Find a—" "No." Briar's voice was still wrapped in silk-covered steel. "We stay on schedule." But the baby didn't care about schedules. He didn't care that his father controlled the West Coast's most powerful Korean syndicate. That men bowed when he entered rooms, that entire operations had crumbled at his word. The infant only knew hunger, discomfort, and the absence of the warmth he'd known for 3 precious months before it was stolen away. Briar had tried everything. Bottles prepared by the nanny who waited at their destination, pacifiers that the child spat out with surprising force, rocking motions that felt awkward in his arms that were more accustomed to signing contracts and ending lives than soothing cries. Nothing worked. 4 rows back, Nancy Porter heard the desperate cries and felt her body respond instinctively. Her breasts ached with sympathetic letdown, milk threatening to soak through the nursing pads she still wore, despite the fact that she closed her eyes, forcing down the wave of grief that always came with that thought. 8 months. It had been 8 months since she'd held her own son. 8 months since the tiny heart had simply stopped beating in the night. No explanation. No warning. Sudden infant death syndrome, the doctors had said, as if putting a name to the nightmare made it hurt less. Nancy had been heading home from a grief counseling conference in Seattle, trying to put her shattered life back together. She was a pediatric nurse, or at least she had been, after losing Franklin. She couldn't bring herself to return to the NICU, couldn't watch other people's babies thrive while hers lay cold in the ground. The crying intensified, and Nancy felt tears prick her own eyes. She knew that sound. The desperate, hungry wail of an infant who needed something primal, something only a mother could provide. Her hands trembled as she gripped the armrests. "Miss, are you all right?" The train attendant paused beside her, concerned. Nancy looked up, then back toward where the crying originated. "That baby. He sounds, I'm a nurse. Maybe I can help." The attendant's expression shifted to something between relief and uncertainty. "The passenger has been quite firm about not wanting assistance, but if you'd like to try, I suppose it couldn't hurt." Nancy unbuckled her seatbelt before she could second-guess herself, following the attendant down the aisle. With each step, her heart pounded harder. This was insane. She was still lactating. Her body hadn't gotten the memo that there was no longer a baby to feed. But she couldn't just offer to breastfeed a stranger's child, could she? A Korean stranger's child. A man who looked like he could end her with a glance. Then she saw him. Briar Lee sat like an emperor on a throne. Even in distress, sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, a strong jaw darkened by precisely maintained stubble, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The tattoos on his neck told stories in ink traditional Korean imagery that marked him as someone dangerous, someone powerful. He wore authority like a second skin, and danger rolled off him in waves that made her survival instincts scream to turn around. But the baby in his arms looked so small, so helpless against that broad chest. The infant's face was flushed red from crying. Tiny features scrunched in misery. Skin a beautiful blend of Korean and something else. A complexity that spoke of mixed heritage. Nancy noticed something else. The way other passengers, particularly the few other Korean passengers in first class, averted their eyes when Briar's gaze swept over them. The way the bodyguard behind him stood with military precision, earpiece visible, hand resting casually near his jacket in a way that suggested a weapon. The way the air itself seemed to bend around this man, and she was about to walk up to him and offer to breastfeed his child. God help her. But before we find out what happens when Nancy walks up to one of the most dangerous men on the West Coast, if you're loving this story, hit that subscribe button. Trust me. You won't want to miss where this goes. Now, back to the train. Sir. The train attendant's voice was cautious, respectful. This passenger is a nurse. She wondered if she might. Briar's gaze snapped to Nancy, and she felt the impact like a physical blow. Those eyes could strip flesh from bone, could make grown men confess sins they hadn't even committed. For a moment, Nancy forgot how to breathe. A nurse, he repeated, his voice low and rough like gravel wrapped in velvet. An accent lingered at the edges, Korean inflections softened by years in America. Pediatric. Nancy heard herself say, though her voice sounded far away. I know that cry. He's hungry. I've tried the bottle. Frustration cracked through Briar's controlled exterior. He won't take it. Nancy's eyes moved from the man to the baby, and something in her chest cracked open. The infant's cries had taken on a desperate edge, the kind that spoke of real distress. She'd heard it too many times in the NICU, and her body responded before her brain could catch up. Some babies won't take artificial nipples, she said softly, stepping closer despite every instinct telling her to run from this dangerous man. Especially if they were breastfed initially. Was his mother? Something shifted in Briar's expression, a flash of such raw pain that Nancy caught her breath. She died, he said flatly, 3 months ago, giving birth to him. The cabin seemed to go silent around them, though the baby still cried. Nancy's eyes burned with unshed tears, her grief recognizing his even as her nurse's training kicked in. Then he's probably refusing the bottle because he's looking for something familiar, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something he associates with comfort and safety. Their eyes locked, and Nancy saw the exact moment he understood what she was implying. His jaw tightened, and for a second she thought he might order her away. But then the baby let out another desperate wail, and something in the untouchable Mafia boss crumbled. Are you offering what I think you're offering? His voice was dangerous, testing, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Nancy swallowed hard. This was insane. This was beyond insane. But the baby was suffering, and her body was producing milk that had nowhere to go. And maybe, just maybe, she could help this tiny life even though she'd failed to save her own. I'm still producing, she admitted, her cheeks flushing. I lost my son 8 months ago. My body I haven't been able to stop it. If you'd allow me, I could try. The silence that followed was deafening. Every passenger in first class had gone quiet, sensing they were witnessing something profound, even if they couldn't quite understand what. Nancy felt the weight of their stares, some curious, some disapproving. She saw a Korean woman 2 rows up whisper something to her companion, shock evident on her face. Briar stared at this woman, this stranger who had just offered the most intimate gift one human could give another, and felt the ground shift beneath him. In his world, there were no gifts. Everything had a price. Every kindness hid a blade, but this woman's eyes held only compassion and a grief that mirrored his own. The restroom, he said abruptly, standing with fluid grace despite the child in his arms. It's more private. Nancy's heart hammered as she followed him toward the first-class lavatory, acutely aware of the bodyguard who fell into step behind them. This was real. This was actually happening. The bathroom was small but luxurious as a train bathroom could be. Briar stood in the doorway, his large frame taking up most of the space, hesitation written across features that probably hadn't shown uncertainty in years. I'll wait outside, he said finally, his voice rough. Unless you need. I'll be fine, Nancy assured him, though her hands shook as she reached for the baby. What's his name? Kim. The word came out like a prayer and a curse. After my grandfather. Nancy took the infant carefully, cradling his small body against her chest. Kim's cries had diminished to hiccuping whimpers, as if he sensed something was about to change. She looked up at Briar, at this dangerous, powerful man who had just entrusted her with his most precious possession, and saw vulnerability that took her breath away. I'll take care of him, she promised. Briar nodded once, sharp and controlled, then stepped back to let her close the door. The moment it clicked shut, Nancy felt the weight of what she was about to do settle over her like a blanket. Her hands moved on autopilot, unbuttoning her blouse with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The nursing bra came next, and then she was positioning Kim at her breast, supporting his tiny head the way she'd supported so many infants in the NICU. For a moment, nothing happened. Kim whimpered, turning his face against her skin. Searching. Then his instincts kicked in, and he latched on, and Nancy felt the familiar pull and release as he began to nurse. Tears streamed down her face silently as she looked down at the baby in her arms. He wasn't Franklin. He would never be Franklin. But he was a child who needed comfort, who needed nourishment, who needed the one thing her body was still desperate to provide. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, stroking his dark hair. "It's okay." Outside the door, Briar stood with his fists clenched at his sides, his bodyguard wisely maintaining distance. The silence that had replaced his son's cries was both a relief and a torment. He just handed Kim to a complete stranger. He, who trusted no one, who verified the background of every person who came within 10 feet of his child, had just given his son to a woman whose last name he didn't even know. But something about her had reached through the armor he'd built around himself. Maybe it was the grief in her eyes that matched his own. Maybe it was the desperate courage it took to offer such an intimate kindness to a stranger. Or maybe it was simply that for the first time in 3 months, someone had offered to help without wanting something in return. When the bathroom door opened 15 minutes later, Nancy emerged with Kim sleeping peacefully in her arms. The infant's face was relaxed, his tiny fist curled against her chest, completely at peace. Briar looked at his son, truly peaceful for the first time since Minji's death, and felt something shift in his chest. Something dangerous. Something that, in his world, could get people killed. "He's asleep," Nancy said unnecessarily, her voice soft to avoid waking the baby. "He ate well. He'll probably sleep for a few hours now." She moved to hand Kim back. But Briar's hand shot out to stop her, his fingers wrapping around her wrist with surprising gentleness. "Your name," he demanded, though his tone had lost its edge. "Nancy. Nancy Porter. Briar Lee." He released her wrist, taking Kim from her arms with practiced care. His son barely stirred, too content to wake. "I owe you a debt, Nancy Porter." "You don't owe me anything," Nancy began, buttoning her blouse, suddenly aware of how intimate this situation was. "I was happy to help. In my world, everything comes with a price." Briar's eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And what you just did feeding my son, giving him peace when nothing else could, that's not something I can simply walk away from." Something in his tone made Nancy's heart race with more than attraction. It sounded almost like a warning. "I should get back to my seat." "Wait." The word was command, not request. Briar shifted Kim to one arm with the ease of someone who'd been doing this alone for months, then pulled a business card from his suit pocket. "Call me when we land. I want to properly thank you." Nancy took the card reflexively, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent electricity up her arm, and from the slight widening of his eyes, he'd felt it too. "That's not necessary. It is to me." His voice had gone soft. "Dangerous. You gave my son something precious. The least I can do is buy you dinner." Nancy knew she should say no. Everything about this man screamed danger, from the way other passengers averted their eyes when he passed to the bodyguards who shadowed his movements. But there was something in his expression when he looked at his son, a vulnerability that called to her own broken heart. "Dinner," she found herself agreeing. "Just dinner." A ghost of a smile touched Briar's lips, transforming his face from dangerous to devastatingly handsome. "Just dinner," he echoed, though something in his tone suggested he was making a promise neither of them understood yet. Nancy returned to her seat in a daze, the warmth of Kim's small body still imprinted on her skin. She didn't notice the way Briar's bodyguards were already pulling up information on her, didn't see the calculating look in Briar's eyes as he watched her walk away. In his world, in the world of the Korean-American Mafia, where tradition ran deeper than blood, what had just happened wasn't simple. It wasn't just a kind stranger helping a child in need. In the old ways, the ways his grandfather had taught him, the ways that still governed the ancient families, a woman who nursed a boss's child became bound to that family. Became bound to him. Nancy Porter had just fed his son. She'd given Kim the one thing Briar couldn't provide. The one thing he'd been desperate for since Minji's death. In doing so, she'd fulfilled a role that, in the traditions of their world, made her something sacred, made her his. Nancy has no idea what she just walked into. The consequences of this one act of kindness are about to spiral in ways she never imagined. If you want to see how this unfolds, subscribe and buckle up. This story is just getting started. The black SUV that picked up Nancy from her apartment 2 days later was not what she'd expected. She'd imagined a normal restaurant, maybe something upscale, given Briar's obvious wealth. Instead, the driver, a mountain of a man with cold eyes and an earpiece, had escorted her into a vehicle that screamed federal protection or something darker. The windows were tinted so dark she couldn't see out, and the locks engaged with an ominous click the moment her door closed. "Where are we going?" Nancy tried to keep her voice steady as the SUV pulled into traffic. "The Lee estate, miss." The driver's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Lee thought you'd be more comfortable with a private dinner. Given the baby, the Lee estate." Not Briar, not Mr. Lee, with casual American familiarity, the formal distance that suggested this was business, not pleasure. Nancy's stomach twisted as pieces began clicking into place. The bodyguards on the train, the way passengers had given him wide berth, the ease with which he commanded others, the tattoos that marked him as something more than a simple businessman. The SUV wound through Seattle's streets before heading into the suburbs, each mile taking them farther from public spaces and closer to sprawling estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. When they finally turned through a particular gate, this one guarded by 2 men with very obvious weapons, Nancy felt her heart climb into her throat. The estate was massive, a stunning blend of traditional Korean architecture and modern luxury. Curved tile roofs met floor-to-ceiling glass walls. Manicured gardens stretched in every direction, koi ponds reflecting the evening light. Nancy counted at least 4 other security personnel patrolling the grounds before the SUV pulled up to the main entrance. "Miss Porter." A woman in her 60s appeared at the door, her expression severe as she looked Nancy over with barely concealed disapproval. "I'm Min Seo, the house manager. Mr. Lee is waiting in the nursery, if you'll follow me." Nancy caught the emphasis on Mr. Lee. The way Min Seo's lips thinned as she took in Nancy's appearance, her natural curls, her brown skin, everything that marked her as an outsider in this Korean household. The message was clear: you don't belong here. Min Seo led her through a home that belonged in Architectural Digest. Marble floors inlaid with traditional Korean patterns. Priceless artwork, both ancient scrolls and contemporary pieces. Furniture that cost more than Nancy's yearly salary. Everything screamed wealth and power and danger. They climbed a grand staircase to the 2nd floor, and Nancy heard it before she saw it. Kim's cries. Not as desperate as on the train, but still distressed. Min Seo opened a door to reveal a nursery that was both opulent and surprisingly warm, decorated in soft blues and silvers with hand-painted murals of Korean landscapes covering one wall. Briar stood by the window, Kim wailing in his arms, his expression tight with frustration. He'd shed the suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle, and Nancy's breath caught extensive tattoos that disappeared beneath the fabric. Not regular tattoos. These were deliberate, symbolic, traditional Korean imagery, mixed with something darker, the kind of ink that told stories in the criminal underworld. "Nancy." His voice was rough with relief as he turned. "Thank God. He's been crying for you." "Crying for me?" Nancy's voice came out higher than intended. "Briar? What is this? Who are you really?" Something flickered in his dark eyes. Respect, maybe. That she was asking directly. He gestured to Min Seo, who slipped out silently, closing the door behind her. Suddenly, Nancy was alone with the most dangerous-looking man she'd ever met and his crying infant. "I think you already know," Briar said quietly, still rocking Kim. "You're smart. You've put the pieces together. You're with organized crime." It wasn't a question. "I am organized crime. At least I'm the head of the Lee family. We control most of the operations from here to San Francisco. Imports, construction, shipping, some legitimate, some less legitimate." Nancy backed toward the door, her hand fumbling for the handle. "I need to leave. Kim needs you." Briar's voice stopped her, not because it was commanding, but because it was broken. "Look at him, Nancy. Really look." Against her better judgment, Nancy did. The baby in Briar's arms was thinner than he'd been on the train. His cries had a weak quality that made her nurse's instincts scream alarm. Dark circles shadowed his tiny eyes, and his skin had lost the healthy flush infants should have. What happened? She was moving forward before she could stop herself. He looked fine 2 days ago. He won't eat. Briar's jaw clenched. Not the bottle, not anything. He took one bottle the night we landed, and since then he's refused everything. The pediatrician wants to hospitalize him, put in a feeding tube. But his voice cracked. I can't do that to him. He's already lost his mother. Nancy reached for Kim, and the moment the baby was in her arms, his cries diminished to whimpers. He turned his face against her chest, rooting instinctively. Oh, sweetheart, you're so hungry, aren't you? She whispered. I'm sorry. I know this isn't fair to you, Briar said, running a hand through his hair, the gesture making him look younger, more vulnerable. I know I have no right to ask. But when I saw how he responded to you on the train, how peaceful he was. Nancy, I haven't seen my son peaceful since the day he was born. Not once. Nancy looked from the baby in her arms to the man before her. This terrifying, powerful, dangerous man who was also a desperate father trying to save his child. She thought of Franklin, of how she would have moved heaven and earth to keep her son alive. This is insane, she whispered. I know you're a criminal. Yes, I should run out that door and never look back. Probably, but he needs to eat. Nancy fed Kim in privacy while Briar waited outside, the baby finally settling into peaceful sleep. When she emerged, Briar's relief was palpable, but his expression remained grim. We need to talk, he said, leading her to a sitting room adjacent to the nursery, about the situation. What situation? Nancy's stomach dropped. Word got out. About you. About what you're doing for Kim. He poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, his movements controlled but tense. 3 families have already reached out making inquiries. Inquiries about what? About whether I've claimed you formally. Whether you're under my protection as just an employee or as something more. His eyes met hers, dark and intense. In the old traditions, a woman who nurses a boss's child becomes sacred to that family. She's seen as, I'm not Korean. Nancy's voice was flat. I saw how Min Seo looked at me. How those people on the train looked at me. I'm not part of your tradition. That's exactly the problem. Briar set down his glass. To some families, what you did is sacred, binding. To others, you're an outsider threatening bloodline purity. Either way, you're now valuable and vulnerable. Nancy stood abruptly. I didn't agree to any of this. I just wanted to help a baby. I know, but in my world, intentions don't matter. Actions do. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. Nancy, I can protect you, but I need you to stay, at least until we can get Kim eating properly. How long? 1 week. Help me transition him to bottles, work with a lactation consultant to find a solution. After that, he pulled out his phone. I'll have my lawyer draw up a contract. You'll be free to leave with no retaliation, no following you, no claiming you as property. You have my word. Your word? Nancy laughed bitterly. You're a criminal. I'm a father first. His jaw tightened. And my son is dying because he refuses to eat. You're the only person who can help him. Nancy looked at Kim, sleeping peacefully in the bassinet Briar had wheeled in. The baby looked so fragile, so small. She thought of Franklin, of those last precious days before 1 week, she heard herself say. And I want that contract within the hour. In writing. Signed. Witnessed. Legally binding. Done. An hour later, Nancy sat in Briar's study, reading through pages of legalese that essentially stated she was free to leave after 7 days with no interference from the Lee family or their associates. She signed it with shaking hands. As Briar's lawyer left, Min Seo appeared with tea. The older woman's expression had softened slightly. You should know what you're getting into, Min Seo said quietly, pouring tea with practiced grace. My husband worked for Mr. Lee's father. 30 years in this life. A rival's bullet took him in the end, meant for the old boss. She paused. But those 30 years were full of love and loyalty. Yes, there was darkness. But there was light too. Why are you telling me this? Nancy asked. Because I see how Mr. Lee looks at you. Like your salvation. Min Seo's eyes held warning. But you're not Korean. The old families, they won't accept this easily. You'll face things prejudice, hatred, danger. The question is whether you're strong enough. I'm only staying a week. Min Seo smiled sadly. That's what I told myself once. 40 years ago, after Minseo left, Nancy stood at the window overlooking the estate grounds. Armed men patrolled the perimeter. Cameras swept the property. She was in a gilded cage, bound by traditions she didn't understand, helping a child she was already starting to love. And the most terrifying part? Some small piece of her didn't want to leave. Briar found her there an hour later. The guest suite next to the nursery is ready. Minseo will show you. Kim will probably wake in a few hours. Briar, why me? Why not hire a wet nurse? There are services, says. I tried. His voice was raw. They all refused once they learned who I was. No one wants to get involved with my family. But you offered without knowing, without wanting anything. He stepped closer. That makes you either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Nancy whispered. His hand lifted, almost touching her face before he caught himself. 7 days, Nancy Porter. I'll spend them making sure you're safe. And when you leave, because I know you will, I'll make sure you stay safe. That's my promise. But as Nancy lay in the luxurious guest suite that night, listening to Kim's soft breathing through the baby monitor, she wondered if 7 days would be enough. Enough to save Kim. Enough to protect her heart from breaking again. Enough to escape before she fell for the dangerous man sleeping down the hall. 4 days into Nancy's 1-week stay, the estate had become a strange kind of home. Kim was gaining weight, his cheeks filling out, his cries stronger and healthier. Nancy spent most of her time in the nursery. And Briar was there for almost every feeding, sitting in the corner chair like a silent guardian, watching his son nurse with an expression that twisted Nancy's heart. He's doing so much better, Nancy said on the 4th evening. Kim sleeping peacefully in her arms after his feeding. Another few days and he'll be strong enough to try transitioning to expressed milk. Good. But Briar's tone didn't sound pleased. He looked tense, wound tight, his jaw locked in that way she was starting to recognize, meant he was holding something back. What's wrong? I had you investigated. He said it without apology, meeting her eyes directly. The moment you offered to feed Kim on that train, I had my people pull everything about you. Nancy's stomach dropped. Everything? I know about Franklin, about the SIDS diagnosis, about the fact that you haven't worked since it happened, that you've been in grief counseling, that you're rebuilding a life that feels impossible to rebuild. He stood, moving closer. I know you lost everything that mattered. Nancy should have been furious about the invasion of privacy, should have slapped him and stormed out. But instead, she felt oddly relieved that he knew, that she didn't have to explain the gaping wound in her heart. Then you understand why this can't be more than a temporary arrangement, she said softly. Why I can't get attached to Kim. Or to... She stopped, unable to finish. Or to me. Briar's voice was rough. He knelt beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. Nancy, I know loss. I watched Minji die, bringing our son into the world. Watched her bleed out while doctors tried everything to save her. I held her hand as the light left her eyes, knowing that I was losing my wife and Kim was losing his mother before he'd even taken his first breath. Tears streamed down Nancy's face. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't write us off because you're scared. He leaned closer, his presence overwhelming. These past 4 days, I've watched you be so brave. Brave enough to feed a stranger's child. Brave enough to walk into a world you didn't understand. Brave enough to love my son. Even knowing you'd have to leave him. Briar, let me show you something. He pulled out his phone, playing a soft melody. This is what my mother used to sing to me. A Korean lullaby. I've been trying to sing it to Kim, but his voice caught. I want him to know where he comes from, even if his mother is gone. Nancy listened to the haunting melody, then watched as Briar sang softly in Korean, his accent thickening with emotion. When he finished, he met her eyes. Teach me, Nancy whispered. Teach me. The words. Something shifted in Briar's expression, surprise, hope. Something deeper. For the next hour, he taught her the lullaby, their voices blending as Kim slept. Nancy stumbled over the Korean words, and Briar corrected her gently, his hand covering hers when she got frustrated. Like this, he murmured, singing the phrase again. So close, she could feel his breath against her cheek. When Kim finally stirred, Nancy sang the lullaby in her imperfect Korean, and Briar's eyes filled with tears. After Kim settled back to sleep, They moved to put him in his crib together. Their movements synchronized like they'd been doing this for years. As Nancy straightened, Briar was right there. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb stroking her skin with surprising gentleness. "You're already ours," he whispered, "whether you admit it or not." And then he was kissing her. It was gentle at first, a soft press of lips that asked permission rather than demanding surrender. Nancy froze for half a heartbeat, every rational thought screaming that this was wrong, but then Briar's other hand slid into her hair, and she melted into the kiss like she was coming home. He tasted like whiskey and danger and something uniquely him that made her head spin. His hand cradled her face like she was precious, like she was sacred. The kiss deepened, and Nancy felt months of walls crumbling around her heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Briar rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not for a week. Stay. I can't." "You can!" His voice was fierce now, desperate. "Kim needs you. I need you. And unless I'm completely misreading things, you need us too." Nancy looked at the sleeping baby, then back at the dangerous, beautiful man offering her a life she'd never imagined. "I'm scared. So am I." Briar kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. "But I'm more scared of letting you walk away. 3 more days on your contract. Give me 3 days to convince you to stay." Nancy woke to chaos. The explosion shattered the pre-dawn silence, rattling windows throughout the mansion. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and her first thought was Kim. She ran barefoot across the hall into the nursery, finding Briar already there, his son clutched protectively against his chest. He was dressed in all black, a gun visible at his hip, a side of him she'd only glimpsed before. "What's happening?" Nancy's voice trembled. They made their move. Briar's face was carved from stone. All vulnerability from their kiss the night before replaced by the cold boss she'd glimpsed on the train. The Park family. They just bombed my warehouse on the docks. Before Nancy could respond, one of Briar's men burst through the door, blood streaking his temple. "Boss, it's a distraction." They hit 3 locations simultaneously, and they left a message. He glanced at Nancy, hesitation clear. "Say it," Briar commanded. "They want the woman. They said if you don't hand over the—" He paused, clearly not wanting to repeat the slur. "The black woman by midnight, they'll level every property you own." The room spun around Nancy. This was her fault. Her presence had painted a target on this family. "Give me to them," she heard herself say. "If it stops the war." "No." Briar's voice was absolute, brooking no argument. He handed Kim to Minseo, who had appeared silently in the doorway. "Take him to the safe room. Now." Then he was in front of Nancy, his hands gripping her shoulders with barely controlled intensity. "Listen to me very carefully. You are under my protection. That means I would burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone take you. Do you understand?" Nancy saw it then, the monster everyone feared. His eyes had gone black and cold, his whole body radiating lethal intent. But his hands on her shoulders remained gentle, even as fury rolled off him in waves. "They'll kill you," she whispered. "They'll try." A dangerous smile curved his lips. "They'll fail." "But Nancy," his expression softened fractionally, "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She should say no, should demand he let her leave, end this before more people died. But looking into his eyes, seeing the fierce protectiveness there, she found herself nodding. "Good." He pulled her close, pressing a hard kiss to her forehead. "Minseo will take you to the safe room with Kim. Stay there until I come for you. Don't open the door for anyone else. Briar, I'll come back." He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I promise you, Nancy Porter, I will come back. We have 3 days left, remember? I'm not done convincing you to stay." Then he was gone, barking orders in Korean as he strode from the nursery. Nancy stood frozen until Minseo touched her arm gently. "Miss Porter, we need to move." The safe room was deep in the mansion's basement, accessed through a hidden door in the wine cellar. It was surprisingly comfortable, a full apartment with bedrooms, kitchen, and enough supplies to last weeks. Minseo was already there with Kim, the baby miraculously still sleeping through the chaos. "How long will we be here?" Nancy asked as Minseo secured the heavy reinforced door. "However long it takes." Minseo's face was grim. "Mr. Lee won't rest until every threat is eliminated. Hours crawled by. Nancy fed Kim when he woke, her body going through the familiar motions while her mind screamed with worry. What was happening up there? Was Briar safe? How many people were dying because of her? When Kim finally went back to sleep, Nancy found herself pacing like a caged animal. Min Seo watched her with knowing eyes. You love him, the older woman said quietly. It wasn't a question. I barely know him. That doesn't answer my question. Nancy stopped pacing, her shoulders slumping. How can I love someone whose world is so violent? My husband worked for Mr. Lee's father, Min Seo said. I told you this before. What I didn't tell you was that I was black too. Mixed, my father was Korean, my mother African American. The old boss's family hated me. Called me the same things the Park family is calling you now. She stood, moving toward Nancy. But my husband chose me anyway. Fought his own family for me. And those 30 years, despite the darkness, they were worth it. Does the light make up for the darkness? That's for you to decide, Miss Porter. But I'll tell you this. I've never seen Mr. Lee look at anyone the way he looks at you. Like you're his salvation. Nancy was still processing those words when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then died completely as backup generators kicked in, bathing everything in emergency lighting. What does that mean? Nancy's voice rose with panic. Min Seo's face had gone pale. It means someone cut the main power. It means they're here. The sound of gunfire erupted from somewhere above them. Muffled but unmistakable. Nancy ran to Kim's portable crib, scooping him up protectively. The baby woke with a startled cry, sensing the tension. Then the safe room door shook with impact. Once. Twice. Someone was trying to break through. Min Seo moved with surprising speed, producing a gun from somewhere and positioning herself between Nancy and the door. Stay behind me, she commanded. All grandmotherly warmth replaced by cold efficiency. More gunfire. Shouting. The sounds of combat filtering down through the reinforced walls. Nancy clutched Kim tighter, tears streaming down her face as she whispered nonsense reassurances to the crying infant. This was her fault. All of it. The explosion rocked the room smaller than the warehouse blast, but devastating in the confined space. Nancy's ears rang as smoke poured through a crack that had appeared in the supposedly impenetrable door. Run! Min Seo shoved Nancy toward the back of the safe room. There's an emergency exit behind the bookshelf. Take Kim and run. What about you? I'll slow them down. Min Seo raised her gun, her expression resolute. Mr. Lee is counting on you to keep his son safe. Go, Miss Porter. Now. Nancy ran, Kim screaming in her arms, fumbling for the hidden latch Min Seo had shown her during the safety briefing. The bookshelf swung open, revealing a narrow tunnel barely lit by battery-powered emergency lights. Behind her, she heard the safe room door finally give way. Heard Min Seo's gunfire once, twice, 3 times. Heard a man's voice shout in Korean. Then she was in the tunnel, running blindly through the darkness with Kim clutched to her chest, not knowing if she was running towards safety or into the arms of the enemy, not knowing if Briar was alive or dead, not knowing if she'd ever get the chance to tell him that yes. God help her. She did love him. The tunnel seemed endless, but finally Nancy saw light ahead. She burst out into the night air, finding herself in the woods behind the estate. In the distance, she could see flames rising from the mansion, could hear the sounds of combat, and then she heard something else, a car engine getting closer. Nancy turned to run deeper into the woods, but it was too late. The SUV screeched to a stop, and men poured out. Not Briar's men. She knew that instantly from the way they moved, from the predatory smiles on their faces. One of them stepped forward, older with cold eyes and a smile that made Nancy's blood freeze. The famous wet nurse, he said in heavily accented English. Finally. Take her. Nancy fought, screaming, clutching Kim desperately as hands grabbed her. But it was useless. They were professionals, and she was just a terrified woman trying to protect a baby. The last thing she saw before they forced a cloth over her mouth was the mansion burning in the distance. Smoke rising like a funeral pyre into the dawn sky. Then darkness claimed her. Nancy woke in a room that reeked of old money and older sins. Her head pounded from whatever they'd used to knock her out. But her first thought was Kim. She bolted upright to find the baby sleeping peacefully in an antique bassinet beside the ornate bed where she'd been placed. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by terror. Where were they? Was Briar alive? Awake finally. The voice came from the shadows. The older man from the woods stepped into the light, and Nancy's stomach twisted. I am Park Jin-ho, and you, my dear, are worth your weight in gold. Where are we? Nancy's voice was hoarse. My estate. About 50 miles from the Lee compound. Or what's left of it. His smile was cruel. Don't worry, your beloved boss is alive. For now. I made sure word reached him about where to find you. You want him to come? Of course. Park moved closer, and Nancy pressed herself back against the headboard. Briar Lee destroyed my family 10 years ago. Killed my sons. Took my territory. Left me with nothing but scraps. And now, he gestured to Kim. Now he cares about something. Finally, after a decade of being untouchable, he has a weakness. He leaned in, his breath hot on Nancy's face. 2 weaknesses, actually. You and his precious heir. The sacred wet nurse and the son who bears the Lee name. Tell me, does he love you? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play stupid. Park's hand shot out, gripping her chin painfully. I've seen the reports. The way he looks at you. The way he's protected you. Briar Lee hasn't cared about anything since his wife died. But he cares about you. He released her, smoothing his suit. And that is going to destroy him. He'll kill you, Nancy said, trying to sound brave. Perhaps, but first, he'll have to watch me hurt what he loves. And that Park's smile was vicious. Will be worth dying for. He moved to the window, gesturing for Nancy to join him. Reluctantly, she did, keeping distance between them. In the courtyard below, she could see armed men patrolling, traditional Korean architecture surrounding them like a fortress. He's already here, you know, Park said conversationally. Arrived an hour ago, alone, no weapons, no backup, hands raised in surrender. He turned to Nancy, eyes glinting. Do you know what he's offering me? Everything. His entire empire. Territory, businesses, operations, all of it. Just to keep you and his son safe. Nancy's heart stopped. Oh, but he is. Right now, he's standing in my courtyard, willing to trade everything he's built for the life of a black woman and a half-breed child. Park's disgust was evident. Pathetic. He's forgotten what it means to be Korean, forgotten honor and tradition. You've corrupted him. Cruzound. I didn't ask for any of this. No. You just swooped in like some savior, offering your body to feed his child. Do you know what the old families think of you? You're pollution. A stain on the Lee bloodline. And Briar Park spat the name like a curse. He's chosen you over everything. Over his heritage. Over his honor. Nancy's hands shook with rage and fear. Love isn't pollution. Family isn't about bloodlines. Family is everything about bloodlines. Park's composure cracked. But Briar has forgotten that. So I'll remind him. I'll make him watch as I take everything from him. Starting with you. He pulled a gun, pressing it to Nancy's temple. Kim, sensing the tension, began to cry. Nancy's breath caught. Every muscle freezing. Let's go see what your lover is willing to sacrifice for you, shall we? Park dragged Nancy down elaborate stairs, Kim's cries echoing through the traditional Korean estate. They emerged into a study with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the courtyard. And there, illuminated by floodlights, stood Briar. He looked like he'd walked through hell. His suit was torn and blood-stained, a cut above his eye. But he stood tall and defiant, hands raised in surrender. No bodyguards, no weapons visible, just a man willing to give up everything. When their eyes met across the distance, Nancy saw Briar's mask crack. Raw emotion flooded his face, relief, fear, love. Lee! Park called through the open window. Your empire for the woman and child. Sign over everything. Make me boss of the Lee family. And I'll let them live. Done. Briar didn't hesitate. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't hurt them. Nancy's eyes widened with shock. He was giving up everything, his entire world. His power, his legacy for her and Kim. Touching, Park sneered. But I think we both know I can't let you live, Lee. You'll just rebuild. Come after me. No, you have to die. But first, he pressed the gun harder against Nancy's temple. You'll watch me take everything. Starting with her, everything happened in slow motion. Nancy saw Briar move impossibly fast for someone who was supposed to be unarmed. His hand went to his ankle, came up with a weapon. At the same moment, Nancy did the only thing she could think of. She slammed her head backward into Park's face with all her strength. Park jerked, his grip loosening, and Nancy bit down hard on his gun hand. The shot went wide, shattering the window behind her. Glass exploded inward, and then the world erupted into chaos. Doors burst open and Briar's men poured in. They'd been there all along, hidden, waiting. But Briar himself was already inside, moving like death incarnate. Nancy had never seen anything so terrifying or so beautiful. Park grabbed for Nancy again, but she swung Kim's bassinet at his knee. Thankfully, the baby was still in her arms, and the old man stumbled. It was all the opening Briar needed. You touched what's mine, Briar snarled, and his fist connected with Park's jaw with a crack that echoed through the room. The fight was brutal but brief. Park was old, past his prime. Briar was in his prime and fueled by fury. Within minutes, Park was on his knees, bleeding, defeated. Briar stood over him, gun leveled at the old man's head, and Nancy saw his finger tighten on the trigger. This was the monster. The killer. The boss who'd built his empire on violence. Briar. Nancy's voice cut through the haze. Don't. He looked at her, and Nancy saw him warring with himself, saw the darkness battling with the man she'd come to know. He tried to kill you, Briar growled. He put his hands on you. Called you. His voice broke on the racial slur Park had used. I know. Nancy walked closer, Kim sleeping miraculously in her arms despite the chaos. But if you kill him like this, in cold blood while I watch, you'll lose yourself. And I need you. Kim needs you. Her voice softened. We need the man I love. The silence that followed was deafening. Briar stared at her, the gun wavering. Say that again, he whispered. I love you. Tears streamed down Nancy's face. I love you, Briar Lee. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love how you fight for your son. I love the man who taught me a Korean lullaby. I love you despite the darkness, despite the danger, despite everything that should keep us apart. Briar lowered his gun slowly. He looked at Park, then back at Nancy. And she saw the moment he chose love over vengeance, chose mercy over violence, chose the man he could be over the monster he'd been. Take him, Briar ordered his men. Turn him over to the council. Let them decide his fate for breaking the old laws, for targeting a sacred woman, for attacking a boss's heir. As Park was dragged away, screaming threats, Briar crossed to Nancy. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then he pulled her and Kim into his arms, holding them like he'd never let go. I thought I'd lost you, he whispered into her hair. When I saw the safe room breached, when I couldn't find you, Nancy, I thought I'd lost you both. You found us. Nancy pulled back to look at his face, taking in the cuts and bruises. You gave up everything to save us. I'd give up everything 1,000 times over. He cupped her face with shaking hands. None of it matters without you. The empire, the power, the name, it all means nothing if you're not here. The families won't accept that, Nancy said. You can't just walk away from being a boss. Watch me. His eyes blazed with determination. I'm done with this life, Nancy. I'm done with violence and death, and living in darkness. You made me want something more, made me remember there's light in the world. He kissed her softly, reverently. I'm taking my son and the woman I love, and I'm walking away, but my cousin Jin Woo has been waiting for this position for years. He can have it. I'm taking you and Kim, and we're starting over. Somewhere far from this world, somewhere safe. His forehead pressed against hers. If you'll have me, if you'll give me a chance to be the man you deserve. Nancy looked at this dangerous, beautiful man who'd just chosen her over everything. Who'd sacrificed his empire for love. Who'd let mercy triumph over vengeance because she'd asked him to. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll have you. Yes, I'll give you a chance. Yes, to all of it. Briar kissed her then, deep and desperate, pouring everything he felt into it. Around them, his men quietly secured the estate. But in that moment, it was just the three of them, a broken family becoming whole. The sun was rising over the Park estate as Briar's men finished securing the property. Nancy sat in what had been Park's study, feeding Kim while Briar made phone calls that would change everything. "It's done," he said finally, ending his last call and crossing to where she sat. "Jin-woo will take over the Lee family. The council has approved the transition." "Just like that?" Nancy asked. "You just walk away?" "Just like that." Briar knelt beside her chair, watching Kim nurse with that expression of wonder he always wore. "I told them I'm retiring, that I'm taking my son and—" He paused, his hand covering hers. "And the woman I love somewhere far from this world." "Briar, are you sure? This is your legacy? Your family? You're my family now." His voice was fierce. "You and Kim, that's all that matters." He waited until Kim finished eating and Nancy had settled him in his carrier before taking both her hands in his. "Nancy Porter, I need to ask you something properly. Not because of ancient traditions or sacred bonds or anything the old families believe." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Nancy's breath caught. "I love you," Briar said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love your strength, your compassion, your beautiful soul. I love how you walked into my world without fear, how you fought for my son, how you made me want to be a better man." He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring, a diamond surrounded by smaller stones in a design that somehow blended Korean and American aesthetics. "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Not because tradition demands it, but because I can't imagine my life without you." Tears streamed down Nancy's face. A week ago, she'd been a broken woman running from grief. Now she was looking at a future she'd never dared imagine, with a man who'd given up everything for her, with a child who'd healed something broken in her heart. "I do love you," she whispered. "God help me, I do. Yes, Briar Lee. Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Kim made a small sound from his carrier. "He approves," Nancy said, wiping her eyes. "Good, because I already bought property in Oregon." Briar pulled out his phone, showing her photos of a beautiful modern home near the coast, surrounded by forest, far from the syndicates, far from the violence. "A place where we can just be a family." "Oregon," Nancy repeated, studying the photos. "It's beautiful. It's ours. If you want it." His arm wrapped around her waist. "I want to give you everything, Nancy. A home, a future, a life where you don't have to be afraid, where Kim can grow up in peace, where we can heal together." "What about the families? Won't they come after you?" "The council gave me their blessing. Jinwoo will handle any dissent." Briar's expression darkened briefly. "And I made it very clear, anyone who touches you or Kim answers to every family on the West Coast. You're under permanent protection, even as I walk away." Nancy looked at the ring on her finger, then at the man beside her, then at the sleeping baby who'd brought them together. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow if you want. Or we can stay a few days, handle the transition." He kissed her temple. "Whatever you need. Tomorrow," Nancy decided. "I want to start our new life as soon as possible. Put all of this behind us. Tomorrow it is." Briar stood, pulling her up with him. "But first, we should probably get checked out by a doctor. Make sure you and Kim are okay." After his voice caught, unable to finish. "We're okay," Nancy assured him. "Minseo." Her voice broke. "She saved us. She gave her life so we could escape." "I know." Briar's jaw tightened. "She'll be honored. Her family will be taken care of. I promise you that." They stood together in the morning light, Kim sleeping peacefully nearby, the weight of their decisions settling over them like a blessing. Briar had chosen love over power, mercy over vengeance, hope over darkness. And Nancy had chosen courage over fear, trust over safety, love over loneliness. "I can't believe this is real," Nancy whispered. "Believe it." Briar turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "We're going to build something beautiful together. Something our son can be proud of. A family forged, not by blood or tradition, but by choice. By love," Nancy added. "By love." Briar agreed, and kissed her, as the sun rose on their new beginning. 6 months later, Nancy stood in a small chapel overlooking the Oregon coast. wearing a simple white dress that somehow managed to incorporate both American elegance and subtle Korean design elements. Kim, now 9 months old and healthy, babbled happily in the arms of their wedding planner, switching effortlessly between Korean and English sounds that made everyone smile. Nervous? Briar asked, looking devastating in a charcoal suit, his hand warm in hers. Terrified, Nancy admitted, but in a good way. The wedding was small, just a handful of people who'd followed Briar into his new life. Nancy's parents, who'd cautiously accepted their daughter's whirlwind romance with the reformed businessman, and a few friends Nancy had made in their coastal community. No one needed to know the whole truth about Briar's past. That chapter was closed. The vows were simple. No mention of bosses or empires or sacred traditions. Just two people promising to love each other through whatever came next. When Briar kissed her, Nancy felt complete for the first time since losing Franklin. This was her family now, her impossible, beautiful, miraculous family. The reception was held at their home, a stunning modern structure that somehow blended Korean architectural elements with Pacific Northwest aesthetics. Clean lines and natural wood, traditional Korean screens alongside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. It was a perfect metaphor for their life honoring heritage while embracing something new. As they danced under string lights on their deck, Kim sleeping peacefully inside with a monitor nearby, Nancy marveled at how much had changed. Any regrets? She asked against Briar's chest. Not one. He pulled back to look at her. Though I should warn you, I got a call today. Elder Park is here. Nancy's stomach dropped. Park? But different Park family. From the East Coast. He asked to speak with us. Said it's important. Briar's jaw tightened slightly. I told him to come by after the reception. 2 hours later, as the last guests departed, a distinguished man in his 70s arrived. Nancy tensed, but Briar's hand on her back was steady. Elder Park. Briar greeted him with careful respect. This is unexpected. Relax, Mr. Lee. The older man smiled warmly. I come as a friend, not a threat. The council wanted someone to deliver this officially. He handed Briar an envelope sealed with multiple family stamps. Briar opened it, Nancy reading over his shoulder. It was a formal document signed by all the major Korean syndicates on both coasts, a permanent release from all obligations, all ties, all claims. You're free, Elder Park said. Truly free. No conditions, no strings. The families voted unanimously. He turned to Nancy, his expression respectful. What you did for Mr. Captain Dollars, Lee's son, Mrs. Lee, that kind of love, that kind of sacrifice, it reminded us all why we have these traditions in the first place. Why we protect women and children above all else. He bowed slightly to both of them. And Briar C. You've taught us all something about honor and love. Real honor isn't maintaining tradition at all costs, it's protecting those you love. Even when it means walking away from power. After Elder Park left, Nancy and Briar stood on their deck in the darkness. The document still clutched in his hand. It's really over, Nancy whispered. It's really over. Briar pulled her close. New life. New beginning. Just us and Kim. And Kim. Nancy smiled, her hand going to her stomach where their secret was still too new to be visible. And maybe, sooner than you think, a little brother or sister for him. Briar's eyes widened. Are you 3 weeks along? I wanted to tell you after the wedding. She bit her lip nervously. Is that okay? His answer was to sweep her into his arms and spin her around, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, both of them were crying happy tears. More than okay, Nancy. You've given me everything. A reason to live, a reason to love, a future worth having. You gave me that too, she said. You and Kim, you saved me when I thought I couldn't be saved. Nancy and Briar found home in each other. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in second chances and healing after loss, you're part of our family. Subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. What does home mean to you? Inside, Kim let out a small cry through the monitor. They broke apart with matching smiles, parents now. Partners. Lovers. Friends. He's hungry, Nancy said. Then let's go feed our son, Briar replied, taking her hand. Together. The way it should be. As they walked inside, Nancy looked back once at the ocean, stretching endlessly before them. At the stars, witnessing their happy ending. She'd walked into a storm 6 months ago on that train. She'd found the most dangerous man on the West Coast and fed his child. And somehow, impossibly, miraculously, she'd found her home. Not in a place, but in a person. In a man who'd given up an empire for love. In a baby who'd needed her as much as she'd needed him. In a family built not on blood or tradition or culture, but on choice. Nancy Porter, now Nancy Lee, had finally found where she belonged, and she was never letting go. They found Kim standing in his crib, tiny hands gripping the rail, tears streaming down his chubby cheeks. The moment he saw them, his face lit up, arms reaching for Nancy. "Mama," he babbled, the first clear word he'd said all week. Nancy's eyes filled with tears as she lifted him, and Briar wrapped his arms around both of them. Their son, their family, their future stretching ahead, bright and full of possibility. "We're here, baby," Nancy whispered in English, then repeated the sentiment in the Korean words Briar had taught her. "We're here. We're always here." One of the clawmen in the mense of Saman Davedi wanted were creating tech to dollars on the porting in the Korean words. As she settled into the nursery rocking chair to feed Kim, Briar sat beside them, his hand resting on her shoulder, and Nancy realized this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting Franklin, never that, but making room for new love, new life, new hope. The grief would always be there, a quiet ache in her heart. But so would this, the weight of a healthy baby in her arms, the warmth of a man who loved her fiercely, the promise of another child growing inside her, life after loss, love after darkness. Family forged in the most unexpected way. Nancy looked at Briar, at this beautiful, dangerous, redeemed man, and smiled through her tears. "Welcome home," he whispered. And finally, after so much pain and fear and running, Nancy understood what home truly meant. It wasn't a place. It wasn't a culture or tradition or bloodline. Home was wherever they were together.